line. Sam, Happy New Year. Thanks for making time for us.
You too. How's it going, guys?
Going great. It's nice to talk to you again. Been a while.
Pretty good. Pretty good. Interesting year. I kind of feel like most of what, I don't think we've talked, I'm not sure we've talked during the season, Sam. Most of what I would have expected for the Bills this year pretty much happened. Regression in turnovers, really don't get open down the field. Of course, there are always going to be injuries. James Cook did it again. Allen, I don't think it was that surprising of a season. New England, however, has made this a very different playoff layout for the Bills. Would you say at least somewhat the same about the Bills' year?
Yeah, I think you're right. Buffalo's part of it is probably exactly as expected. It's just that in the context, the broader context, the Patriots had, an amazing season and the easiest schedule in the NFL by a mile. And so they were able to cruise to a division win and, a better seeding. So, yeah, I think Buffalo is pretty much the team that everybody expected. The question is, where does that fall in the rest of the playoff landscape?
How fair do you feel, Sam? I mean, Mike just made the comment about the shouty shows, and I'm familiar with your work, of course, all these years we've been having you join us. This narrative that if not now, when for the Bills, I'd have an easier time swallowing it entirely. I don't think it's absolutely unfair, but if they were like the 1 seed sitting at the top of the conference with this playoff field behind them, I'd feel like, of course, if not now, when. But their record tells you that they're not some super perfect team. This might be the worst of the era here since they've been a Super Bowl contender. But yet, Allen is a certain level of accomplished, and there is no Lamar, and there is no Burrow, and there is no, of course, Mahomes. I don't know. How do you feel about this has got to be their time?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a pretty unfair narrative on them because it sort of implies that, look, this is like an easy run to the playoffs now because there's no Mahomes, there's no Joe Burrow, there's no Lamar Jackson. I don't think that's true. I mean, you look at the rest of the playoff teams, I think it's wide open this year. And, really with the exception of Pittsburgh, you would say any of these teams in the playoffs are extremely formidable opponents and certainly no easy task for Buffalo to just roll over. So I think it's an unfair narrative being foisted on Josh Allen and the Bills because people only focus on the quarterbacks. And you look at the quarterbacks in this playoff picture, and it does look like it's a gift. You're missing out on 3 of the elite quarterbacks that are typically there most years, and instead those teams have been replaced by others. But the teams that are replacing them are not necessarily any worse than those teams. In fact, obviously this year they've been better. There's no better example of that, I think, than Jacksonville as their first opponent. Jacksonville doesn't have the pedigree. Trevor Lawrence hasn't had the pedigree in the NFL. You've got to go back to his sort of status as a prospect to get to that elite level pedigree. And yet the way he's been playing the last month, 6 weeks or so of the season, I don't know that there's a better football team in the NFL than Jacksonville right now. So this is seen as, Buffalo's year, and yet I think they've got a real task in their hands just to get by Jacksonville.
Yeah, I have felt for a few weeks, since they did a number on Denver before Christmas, Sam, that Jacksonville was the team I least wanted the Bills to draw. And here they are. So let's get into them a little bit, if you would. Like, what are the strengths and the weaknesses? Because this is a team that absolutely turned on a dime with Liam Coen showing up.
Yeah, I mean, they're a complete football team right now. And most of the things improved almost immediately with Liam Cohen's arrival. But the real thing that makes them dangerous right now is that Trevor Lawrence has suddenly joined the rest of the team, and that took longer. That was the one thing I think that everybody thought Liam Coen would be able to move the needle on pretty much immediately, and it didn't happen. For the first half, even more than that of the season, the run game was better, the defense was better, but Trevor Lawrence was not. He was basically still the same inconsistent, above average quarterback that he'd been for most of his NFL career. And then sometime after that, down the stretch, a switch flipped, and from that moment on, Trevor Lawrence has been playing like one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, playing like a guy who should be paid $55 million a year. And if that stays the case, well, then this team is really scary because the rest of the stuff was already good. The run game was already good. The defense was already good. The offensive line is already in good shape. You can also point to the acquisition of Jacoby Myers as well, a wide receiver. They kind of the switch flip for Lawrence kind of at the same sort of time, so it's always difficult to, figure out cause and effect there. But with those two in the lineup and playing the way they're playing right now, this team is serious.
With Sam Monson, is there anything more to how the proverbial switch was flipped here with Lawrence? They also played a pretty light schedule most of the way from the second half on. After their bye, they lose in London in week 7 to the Rams, and that was pretty ugly. They get the bye, and then they win out except for one loss to Houston from there on. You mentioned Myers, Sam. Is there anything else you've noticed about what they're doing, whether it's pass-run ratio or, I don't know, anything, play action, shotgun, whatever it is? What is Jacksonville doing that really helped make Lawrence work?
No, I don't think they changed anything dramatically to make this easier on him. I think Myers is definitely an acquisition that helps. He's a reliable, dependable receiver. Jacksonville's receivers up until this point had not, he still has an incredibly high drop rate on the season. Trevor Lawrence, Myers has one of the best drop rates in the NFL as an individual receiver, basically throughout his entire career. So that was going to help that area. The route running precision, just his reliability and dependability as a receiver helps. They've also gotten a couple of guys back healthy. Brenton Strange at tight end came back. These things have helped as well. But I don't think it's any one thing that they've done to transform Trevor Lawrence into a better quarterback. I think he's just suddenly hit a purple patch. And, it's not the first time he's done that. I mean, we're up to, almost double digits of occasions in his career where people are asking the question, has Trevor Lawrence turned the corner? So it's not the first time that's happened, but it's getting towards the longest stretch of play that you could make that argument for. So, if this is it for real, then the Jags, I think, are a different proposition.
They did outgain the Rams, by the way, in that Week 7 London game by a pretty good number, even though they lost 35-7, for whatever that's worth. Sam Monson with us here on the West Shore Hotline. Back to the Bills, Sam. So we every day it's about what they are at wide receiver, and this has gone on for at least a couple of years now, whether they've invested enough, have enough talent around Josh Allen. How do you see it? Like what they've done, simply since Joe Brady took over, is they've been more of a run-first team, and James Cook did lead the league in rushing. To you, is it advisable? Like, is this the kind of team they should be given their personnel, or have they maybe missed on how they've built this?
I think it's about being able to win playoff games. And this is the tricky thing with analyzing the Bills and how they've been, put together, and whether Brandon Beane is correct or not when he gets upset about the questions. Overall, they're in good shape, and they've been in good shape for years. And that's why they're going to win, 12 games most seasons. And most of the times that's been good enough to win the division, and you're in great shape. But because that's the baseline, the analysis or the sort of nitpicking about the roster becomes, all right, but what about the next 4 games? And that's where people are focusing on when they're criticizing the way that this roster is constructed or the potential weaknesses that it has. It's like, you don't need a true outside number one difference-making receiver that can beat man coverage in most games throughout the regular season. Like, you're good enough because you got Josh Allen, because you got Dalton Kincaid, you've got James Cook, and you've got, a decent roster overall. So in most games, it doesn't really matter that you don't have that guy. But it might matter when you get to the playoffs, and that guy might be the difference between, one play to beat Kansas City or not, or, in this season, one play to beat Jacksonville or any of the other teams are going to be playing. So this is when we get a better idea of how much of a problem it is. We've already seen it at times this season where there have been games where Allen suddenly starts playing that kind of, 10-second time to throw hero ball where he's just running around trying to find something and nobody's open. And those are the problems, right? Teams know that they can play aggressive man coverage against this team because they don't have that guy that can get open consistently. And, Allen is capable of finding something anyway because he's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. And they have individual players that can make plays occasionally, but those are the concerns. It's like against the better opposition in the playoffs, are you going to have enough at the wide receiver position?
You mentioned Kincaid within all of that analysis, Sam, and it's been a very uneven season health-wise for him. He's very much been on a load management type of thing, even when he's dressed for games. But his impact when he is on the field seems extremely positive. So I feel like and he's got a clean bill. He's not even on the injury report. No game designation anyway for the game. So they're expecting him to play. I don't know if that'll mean, 40% of the snaps. That feels like about the ceiling this regular season, but he might be the key to the whole thing for them, I think.
Yeah, I think he absolutely is. I think he's critical to their offense. I think, number one, he makes a big difference when he's out there. And number two, I think he's the best of those players that are sort of all trying to operate in the same area in terms of their best usage, their best skill set within the offense. So, yeah, I think Kincaid being there is a huge thing for this offense.
With Sam Monson. So what about this matchup that we haven't covered yet maybe is interesting to you? I know, for one thing, Jacksonville has this great run defense where nobody's run for 75 yards against them, or more than that anyway, this year. But James Cook was about at 100 yards a week. Do you like one side or the other there? Is there something else about this matchup that makes you lean one way or the other?
I think both run games are pretty interesting, actually. Like you said, Jacksonville's is very good. Buffalo, I think, will want to run the ball as much as they can, try and take the pressure off that pass game and not have Josh Allen play Superman the entire time, like only tap into that when they need to. And then the other side of it, Jacksonville's run game is really good, and Buffalo's run defense is not really good. And the thing – they've been interesting this season because if you wanted to point to kind of one area where Buffalo season kind of ran off the rails a little bit, like they had that crazy streak of 30 games or whatever it was of winning the turnover battle every single week, and then suddenly that disappeared. And that's part of the logic of how this run defense is built as well. Like they will give up a lot, but that's not necessarily a bad thing all the time. It's kind of by design, right? If you give an opponent 12 play drive and they're chewing up the ground or chewing up the clock and chewing up plays on the ground and only rattling off 5 yards for a carry or whatever, they're not scoring on most of those plays, and they're giving the defense another opportunity to get a turnover somewhere down the line. And for a long time, Buffalo was extremely good at doing that, getting the turnover and then offsetting all that yardage that they gave up. But if that dries up, then you're just giving up a lot of ground or a lot of yardage on the ground. And Jacksonville's a team that can turn, small run plays into big run plays. They're explosive on the ground. They want to run the ball. They're good at it. So I think that's an area that Buffalo needs to either get the turnovers in the game or figure out a way of clamping down more on that run game.
It's really interesting that the Bills had that season last year. They haven't had it this year. The team they're playing on Sunday has had that season this year.
Yeah.
Jacksonville's taken it away like crazy. And so, I don't know, what is it really to say? This game could boil down to who turns it over and who doesn't. But that's a big swing in this game. Jacksonville has really lived a lot off of that on defense, I think.
Yeah, and it came down to earth a little bit. They were operating at a completely ridiculous level earlier in the season, and it did regress a bit, but it's still been definitely a huge strength of the team.
Sam, which game coming up this weekend are you most looking forward to?
I like them, almost all of them. I feel like the Rams and the Panthers game is likely to be the most lopsided. I feel like I know the Panthers beat the Rams already, but I really can't see a way that repeats itself. Outside of that, I think all the games are pretty fun.
Is there an underdog you like? San Francisco, we were realizing earlier in the show, is up to +6 in Philadelphia. That's a serious move toward the Eagles. So they would be the second biggest dog of the weekend behind Carolina. Everybody else is pretty close. Is there an upset you like?
Yeah, definitely I don't trust the Eagles enough to give them that number of points against pretty much anybody. I think their offense is just too inconsistent for that. Green Bay Chicago game is really interesting as well. The two previous meetings for those teams have literally come down to the final play on both occasions, and they've gone one direction and then the other direction. Caleb Williams has had the ball in his hands trying to score the winning points in both of those games. And on one occasion, he got it done. On the other occasion, he threw an interception and ended the game that way. So I kind of feel like that's going to come down to the same sort of dynamic again. It's going to be nip and tuck and one play at the end for whoever's got the ball last. And it's usually been, I mean, both those games followed the same pattern as well. Green Bay looked the better side, got out to a lead, and then Caleb Williams brought them back. So I would lean Green Bay in that game as well, even though they're obviously the lower seed and lower down in the standings.
Spread's only 3.5. How do you like the Chargers at New England on Sunday night, Sam?
The Chargers, I think, are a fascinating team. I honestly think Justin Herbert has an MVP case based off how he's played this season. That offensive line is utterly ridiculous. It's terrible. It's the worst offensive line in the NFL. They've had the most offensive line combinations of any team in the NFL, and that doesn't even count the Pro Bowl left tackle they lost before the season started in Rashawn Slater. So the way Herbert has been able to play, despite that offensive line, has been genuinely insane. The Patriots will get pressure on him because the line's so bad, everybody will get pressure on him. But it hasn't mattered in a lot of games this season. So, yeah, I think as long as they've got Justin Herbert playing at the level he's playing at right now, they're absolutely live underdogs.
Sam, while we have you for like 2 or 3 more minutes, so many coaching changes in the NFL. I think it may be 8 teams that have vacancies right now, so a quarter of the league. Baltimore and Miami are 2 of the more fascinating ones. Is Miami a team where like a good candidate would want to go? Is that a, like, who knows with Tua? How appealing is that job?
I don't think it's that appealing for a couple of reasons. Number one, you mentioned Tua. That's a problem. I mean, his contract is still there. You're kind of stuck with him. You probably can't go back to him as a starter based off how this season went. I don't know that you can give the keys to Quinn Ewers either off the back of an extremely small sample size. And, you know, it was 7th-round draft pick, I think he was this year. That would be a tough sell. So you got to go try and find a quarterback from somewhere without, you know, necessarily the salary cap flexibility to get the guy you would want. And then I don't feel like the Dolphins are a particularly well-run organization year on year. I mean, aside from anything else, like a quarter of the decision makers that they have in the room deciding on the new general manager and then the new head coach are Dan Marino and Troy Aikman. And it's like, okay, Dan Marino, sure, he's got obviously an all-time great for the franchise, but like I don't know what particularly useful insights Dan Marino is currently bringing to the setup based off his knowledge of, you know, league-wide movers and shakers from the general manager candidate pool. And I kind of feel the same way about Troy Aikman. I mean, he's a commentator. Troy Aikman, I don't think, is particularly well tapped into the front offices throughout the NFL. Those are not, you know, particularly focused, shrewd decision-making processes that they have in place. Plus, you know, owner and the owner's son-in-law or whatever it is. It's just, this is not a particularly smart directed franchise. So whoever is coming in there is dealing with a quarterback problem. Who knows what the decision-making tree looks like? I think you've got a lot to navigate as the coach there.
Is there a coaching opening candidate combo that you like at this point? Like someone that you think is just the right guy for any of these jobs that are available currently?
So a lot of this would kind of depend on the interview that he gave. But I think just from an X's and O's standpoint, Brian Flores in Baltimore would be a really, really interesting fit there. Flores obviously has done incredible work as the defensive coordinator in Minnesota, but that's not the reason that he doesn't have a head coaching job. You know, and the reason he doesn't have a head coaching job, in fact, there's multiple reasons. Number one, the first time went pretty spectacularly badly. Not if you just looked at the wins and losses. His record actually isn't that bad, but everybody hated him by the end of that stint, like including everybody that worked for him, and that's not good. Yep. So plus you have the added kind of context of him suing the NFL and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot to get through to appoint Brian Flores as a head coach. But if you sat him down in an interview and you were convinced that he had learned from that first stint, that the lawsuit is not a major distraction or a major problem from your point of view, X's and O's wise, I think he'd be an amazing fit there.
Very good. Sam, it's so great to talk to you again. I'm sure you'll enjoy the playoffs. Thanks for your time today.